At the bus stop, 6-year-old Johnny stands beside his mum as they wait. She leans down and whispers, "I'll buy a ticket for myself, but if the driver asks how old you are, say you're 5. That way, I won't have to pay for you." The bus arrives and they climb aboard. Mum purchases an adult return ticket to the town centre. The driver, glancing at Johnny, smiles and asks, "And what's your name, young man?" Johnny beams. "I'm Johnny." The driver nods. "And how old are you, Johnny?" "I'm 5, Johnny replies confidently. The driver chuckles and follows up. "And when will you be 6? Johnny grins wide. "As soon as I get off the bus." While playing in the backyard, little Johnny kills a honeybee. His father sees him killing the honeybee and angrily says no honey for you for 1 month. Later that afternoon, Johnny's dad catches him tearing the wings off a butterfly. "That's it, no butter for you for 1 month," says his dad. Later that evening, as Johnny's mother cooks dinner, a cockroach runs across the kitchen floor. She jumps and stomps on it, and then looks up to find little Johnny and her husband watching her. Little Johnny looks at his father and says, "Are you going to tell her dad, or do you want me to?" A man was speeding down the highway, feeling secure in a gaggle of cars, all travelling at the same speed. However, as they passed a speed trap, he got nailed with an infrared speed detector and was pulled over. The officer handed him the citation, received his signature, and was about to walk away when the man asked, "Officer, I know I was speeding, but I don't think it's fair. There were plenty of other cars around me who were going just as fast, so why did I get the ticket?" "Ever go fishing?" the policeman suddenly asked the man. Yeah," the startled man replied. The officer grinned and added, "Ever catch all the fish?" 3 men were sitting together, sharing stories about their hardships. They had just met at a support group and decided to open up about their struggles. First man. The first guy sighed deeply and said, "I've been living in the jungles of Africa for 3 years. Every day's a battle for survival. Snakes, lions, and no proper food." Second man. The second man chimed in, shaking his head. "That's nothing. I've spent 5 years wandering the scorching deserts of Arabia. No water, no shade, just endless sand. It's brutal." Third man, tearing up. The third man, with a distant look in his eyes, whispered, "I've been living with my wife for 20 years. "Babe, is it in?" "Yeah." "Does it hurt?" "Uh-huh." "Let me put it in slowly." "It still hurts." "Okay, let's try another shoe size." A mother is driving her young daughter to a friend's house for a play date when the little girl curiously asks, "Mummy, how old are you?" The mother smiles and replies, "Sweetheart, it's not polite to ask a lady her age." "Okay," says the little girl, thinking for a moment, then asks, "What colour was your hair 2 years ago?" The mother laughs, but gently responds, "Those are personal questions, dear, and you really don't need to know." Unfazed, the little girl asks, "Why did you and Daddy get a divorce?" That question catches the mother off guard. She turns to her daughter and says, "That's enough, let's not talk about that now." Later that day, the little girl plays with her friend. "My mom won't tell me anything about herself," she says. Her friend, with a mischievous grin, replies, "Well, all you have to do is look at her driver's license. It's like a report card. Everything you need to know is on there. That evening, the little girl confronts her mother with a proud smile. I know how old you are. You're 32. The mother looks surprised. How did you find that out? The little girl continues. And I know you used to have brown hair. The mother is now truly stunned. How did you figure that out? With a gleam in her eye, the little girl exclaims, and I know why you and Daddy got a divorce. The mother, now curious and a little anxious, asks, Oh, really? Why? The little girl looks up confidently and says, Because your driver's license says you got Anafin driving. A woman's husband had been drifting in and out of a coma for months, but she never left his side. Every single day she sat by him, holding his hand and hoping for his recovery. One day he finally opened his eyes, looked around, and motioned for her to come closer. She leaned in, her heart racing with relief and joy. His voice was weak, but he managed to whisper, tears glistening in his eyes. You know something? You have been with me through every tough moment in my life. She smiled warmly as he continued. When I lost my job, you were there for me. When my business went under, you stood by my side. When I got shot, you were right there in the hospital. When we lost the house, you stayed with me. And when my health starts to fail, you never left. Her heart swelled with emotion as she whispered back, Oh, darling, that's so sweet. What are you trying to say? He took a deep breath, looked her in the eye, and said, I think you're cursed. Tim finally decided it was time to tie the knot with his long-time girlfriend. One evening, not long after their honeymoon, he was busy organizing his golf clubs in the garage. His wife stood nearby, quietly watching him in thought. After a long stretch of silence, she finally broke it. Tim, I've been thinking. Now that we're married, maybe it's time for you to give up golf. You spend so much time on the course, and I'm sure you could sell your clubs for a good price. Tim froze, his face suddenly filled with horror. Concerned, she asked, Darling, what's wrong? For a moment there, he said slowly, you sounded just like my ex-wife. Her eyes widened in shock. Ex-wife? I didn't know you were married before. I wasn't, Tim replied with a smirk. The pastor and his wife were a beloved part of the small-town congregation, always bringing warmth and faith to the community. One Sunday morning, the pastor stood before the church members with a sheepish smile. Brothers and sisters, he began, clearing his throat, my wife and I are thrilled to announce that we are expecting another child. That'll make it 7. A ripple of murmurs swept through the pews. The congregation appreciated their pastor's expanding family, but couldn't ignore the strain his growing salary was putting on the church budget. After the service, a meeting was called in the fellowship hall. The atmosphere was tense, with members debating how to handle the situation. We love the pastor, but we're running out of funds, said Mr. Johnson, the church treasurer. It's not right to limit God's blessings, added Mrs. Parker, fanning herself dramatically. The voices grew louder and more divided until the pastor himself walked in, a calm smile on his face. Friends, he said, raising his hand for silence, I've heard your concerns, and I understand. Children are indeed blessings from above, and I'll gladly welcome as many as the Lord sends our way. However, I've come up with a new plan to ease the burden on our church. The congregation leaned forward, eager to hear his solution. Starting today, for every additional child we have, I'll take on a new responsibility to serve this community. Whether it's mending fences, tutoring kids after school, or even joining the church choir, I'll work to ensure that each blessing comes with a blessing in return." The room burst into applause. The idea was ingenious, and it reflected the pastor's deep commitment to his flock. But then, from the back of the hall, old Mrs. Thompson, known for her sharp wit, stood up. Her voice, though frail, carried a playful tone. "Pastor," she said with a twinkle in her eye, "that's a fine plan. But if you're taking on all this extra work, maybe you ought to have a second talk with the Lord about quality and quantity." The room erupted in laughter, and even the pastor couldn't help but chuckle. From that day forward, the pastor's family continued to grow, but so did the unity of the congregation. And as the years passed, every new child was not only a blessing but a reminder of the creative solutions and humor that kept their little church thriving. A professor found himself seated next to a farmer on a train. Feeling bored, the professor decided to suggest a game to make the ride more entertaining. "I'll ask you a question," the professor said. "If you don't know the answer, you give me $5. Then you ask me a question, and if I don't know the answer, I'll give you $500. Sound good?" The farmer nodded in agreement. The professor started confidently. "What's the distance between the Earth and the Moon?" The farmer thought for a moment, then quietly pulled out $5 and handed it over. Now it was the farmer's turn. He asked, "What animal has 3 legs when climbing a mountain and 4 legs when coming down?" The professor was puzzled. He pondered the question, flipped through his notebook, and tried every logical explanation he could think of, but he was stumped. Finally, he sighed, pulled out $500 and handed it to the farmer. The farmer accepted the money with a smile and leaned back to take a nap. Still curious and unable to let it go, the professor shook the farmer awake. "Wait, what's the answer?" he asked. Without a word, the farmer pulled out $5, handed it to the professor, and went back to sleep. A drunk gets up from the bar and staggers to the bathroom. A few minutes later, the bar is shaken by a loud, blood-curdling scream from the bathroom. Everyone freezes, waiting for what's next. After a brief silence, another scream pierces the air, even louder than the first. The bartender, fed up with the commotion, storms into the bathroom to figure out what's going on. "What on earth is all this screaming about?" he shouts. "You're scaring off my customers." From the stall, the drunk slurs back. "I'm just sitting here on the toilet, minding my own business. But every time I flush, something comes up and squeezes the life out of my privates." The bartender sighs, opens the door and looks in. He shakes his head and says, "Buddy, you're sitting on a mop bucket." A large woman in a sleeveless sundress strolled into a bar in London. She raised her right arm, showcasing a massive hairy armpit, and pointed at the patrons, asking, "Which man here will buy a lady a drink?" The bar fell silent as everyone tried to ignore her. But down at the end of the bar, a bleary-eyed drunk slammed his hand on the counter and shouted, "Give the ballerina a drink." The bartender poured the drink, and the woman chugged it down in one go. She turned to the crowd again, revealing the same hairy armpit, and asked, "What man here will buy a lady a drink?" Once more, the same little drunk slapped his cash on the bar and hollered, "Give the ballerina another drink." The bartender leaned over and said to the little drunk, "I must ask, old chap, why do you keep calling her the ballerina?" The drunk replied, "Well, as far as I'm concerned, any woman who can lift her leg that high has got to be a ballerina." Paddy works as a cleaner at the doctor's office. One afternoon, the doctor approaches him and says, "Paddy, keep an eye out for any patients who might arrive. You can leave at 6 as usual. I need to head out for an emergency." The next morning, the doctor asks Paddy how everything went. Paddy replies, "Well, 3 patients came in. The first one had a cough, so I gave him some cough syrup." The doctor nods in approval. "Good, good. And what about the next one?" Paddy continues. "The second patient said he was allergic to grass, so I gave him an antihistamine." The doctor nods again. "And the last one?" Paddy grins and says, "The last one was a woman. She walked in, took off all her clothes, climbed onto the examination table, and said she hadn't seen a man in over 3 years." "Good heavens, That says," the doctor exclaims, "what did you do?" Paddy smirks and replies, "Well, I did what any man would do. I put eye drops in her eyes." Every day, I pass by an ancient mailbox on my walks, an old, rusted box nailed to a grand oak tree that must be at least 150 years old. For 6 years, I've walked by it, always wondering what its story might be. There's no house nearby, no hint of what it might have once served. Any home it belonged to has long since vanished, likely torn down decades ago. Curiosity finally got the better of me, and today I decided to open the mailbox. To my surprise, there was an old letter inside. The envelope, yellowed with age, crumbled slightly at my touch. As you can see in picture #2, the postmark date read July 7th, 1903. The moisture and years had smudged the addressee's name beyond recognition, but I couldn't resist. I carefully opened the envelope, excited at the prospect of discovering some piece of forgotten local history, perhaps a story to share. I unfolded the brittle paper inside and began to read. Here's what it said. "We at Carriage Shield regret to inform you, Mr. Mallard, that the warranty on your buggy has expired. Please take a few moments to sign up for our 2-horse plan and never worry about costly wheel or horseshoe repairs again. Gotcha, didn't I? Haha." A blonde young lady wanted to try out ice fishing. She went out and purchased all the gear she would need and headed to a local spot to try to catch some fish. She went out onto the ice with her gear, and after getting comfy on the stool, she started to cut a circular hole in the ice as she had seen on the internet. As she was cutting, she heard a voice from the heavens speak out, saying, "There are no fish under the ice." The blonde was startled. She stood up and looked around, but saw no one. Cautiously, she moved a little further out on the ice and set up in a different spot. She sipped some hot chocolate from her thermos and then started cutting another hole. Again, the voice called out, seemingly from all around her, "There are no fish under the ice." Now, feeling quite scared and starting to get a bit frustrated, she moved all the way to the far end of the ice and laid out all her gear, sat upon her stool, and started cutting another hole. Right away, the heavenly voice boomed out, this time louder than ever. "There are no fish under the ice." She jumped off her stool and looked all around her. She shouted to the heavens, "Is that you, Lord?" The voice answered, "No, this is the manager of the ice skating rink. There are no fish under the ice." A grandmother is eagerly giving her grown grandson directions to her apartment as he and his wife prepare to visit. You come to the front door of the apartment complex. I'm in apartment 14T. There's a big panel at the door. With your elbow, press button 14T. I'll buzz you in. Come inside. The elevator is on the right. Get in, and with your elbow, press 14. When you get out, I'm on the left. With your elbow, press my doorbell. The grandson, a little confused, says, Grandma, don't worry, I know my way. But why do I need to hit all these buttons with my elbow? Grandma replies, well, are you coming empty-handed?